Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad. Tehami. Massive and record downpours during the monsoon season in Pakistan were witnessed this year, and that resulted into catastrophic flooding in Pakistan, and that rattled Pakistan's economy to the core, which was already strained due to a number of reasons. Now, regarding the damages, the latest figures show that 1,719 people lost their lives in the wake of these devastating floods, while over 2 million houses were either damaged or swept away because of these flood waters. Now, the United Nations, right after the devastation, which was estimated to be around $30 billion US, recommended immediate debt suspension as well as the debt restructuring, and also launched 2 flash appeals for the humanitarian work in the flood-affected areas in Pakistan. Now, the latest estimates show that the damages and the losses which have been accrued because of these devastating floods in Pakistan are not $30 billion, but rather they are around $40 billion US. Now, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif had been leading the efforts of rescue, relief and rehabilitation in the flood-affected areas, and United Nations Secretary General Mr. Antonio Guterres also visited Pakistan, especially the flood-affected areas in Sindh and Balochistan. Specifically talking about Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, he has been urging the international community right from the start of this catastrophe that international community should accelerate its financial assistance towards Pakistan in order to mitigate the impact of these devastating floods. Now, he has called that we do not need any sort of measures like debt restructuring or any sort of moratoriums. He clearly said that we need huge sums of money for mega undertakings of rehabilitation and reconstruction. And now Prime Minister has also said that we are not using the word of reparations, rather we want climate justice. That was exactly the point Secretary General United Nations Mr. Antonio Guterres also sensitize the international community, especially during the United Nations General Assembly's session, that helping Pakistan out was not the matter of generosity, rather it was the matter of justice. Later on, we saw a couple of ideas were also floated of debt swaps as well as the early warning systems in order to deal with such catastrophes in future. There are a lot of aspects to this one as well. We'll be discussing all these aspects in detail, and we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Dr. Ejaz Ahmad, who is environmentalist. Dr. Ejaz Ahmad, thank you very much for your time, for being at Views on News. We really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And we are also being joined on Skype by Dr. Shahid from the UK. He's the water expert. Dr. Shahid, thank you very much for your time also at Views on News. Really appreciate that. Now, let's begin the discussion with you, Dr. Ejaz. Now, the initial estimates right after the floods were $10 billion, then they were increased to $18 billion, then we'd been having the estimate of around $30 billion US of damages and losses in the wake of these devastating floods. But the latest estimates show that they are around $40 billion. And this figure doesn't seem to be stopping over here.
Right. I think, again, as we have been talking earlier, that these damages are going to increase because there are many other considerations that we need to look into, such as our future crops. What is going to happen in our future crop? What will be the overall assessment for wheat crop? Whether the soil is ready for a good yield, what kind of intervention will we need to do in order to make the soil fertile. So the topsoil, which is the more fertile soil, has removed in order to get the same amount of yield, you need to have more and more inputs in the form of fertilizer or organic or inorganic fertilizer. So that will increase the overall cost of the production as well. So I think that losses will accumulate, and then it might increase. And what is going to happen with the crop, which is, it's also I think a big question mark.
There is a looming food security crisis also.
Right. So rice crop was damaged in Sindh, and again the cotton and sugarcane crop was also damaged. And then if we add this, we hope that nothing will happen, but the chances are very high that the impact on wheat crop will be quite significant. So if we add those losses, I think the figure will actually go
There are certain reports which suggest that small farmers, around 353,000 in the flood affected areas, they're also facing problems when it comes to sowing wheat during the season.
Of course, I think that the small farmers always have problems because of the inputs. Whether they will get good quality seed, whether they will get that seed at proper time, what kind of water requirement is there, do we have enough water available for those farmers, then fertilizer, then pesticides. So all these things will ultimately result into the better or quality of yield. And mostly what happens is, in this situation, small farmers, they are always at the losing end. So we hope that nothing of this sort will happen, but chances are quite high.
Right, Dr. Shahid, now the losses which have been estimated, the latest losses are about 40 billion US dollars, $10 billion higher than the previous estimates. Now there seems to be clearly a gap of the pledges by the international community as the United Nations launched 2 flash appeals for the humanitarian work in Pakistan. Now the latest flash appeal is of 816 million US dollars. But so far only $90 million have been received. Why there is such a gap between the pledges and the amount that has been given to Pakistan?
I think it's a very important question you asked, that particularly in the beginning of the floods, when the people are displaced and then they need a lot of help to improve the conditions, save lives, save the livestock and the people who have displaced from their villages and homes. So if at that stage there is a delay from the global community to approach the affected areas, it's really make the issue more complex. But coming back to the losses, as it's about the World Bank report now says it's about $40 billion. As most of the damages we see on the ground is due to the agricultural lands underwater, and there are estimates about 88% of our expected cotton production is affected either due to high rains or due to the floods. And if you see that much impact on the cotton production, that is our major industry that is going to affect the production and exports. So that will be a kind of a ripple down effects of in different sort of industry and exports also. On wheat crop, I'm concerned more about the availability of the wheat seed in the affected areas. That is or should be our number one priority, to provide seed, particularly to the small farmers who are unable or have less resources, or in this condition no resources to go in and buy seed from anywhere. As their homes are affected, that means the seed they have saved for the next crop is also affected. So in a large area that is affected, if we will not be able to provide seed on time, even delayed sowing or in some cases no sowing will also affect the food security of the country, and then our deficit of supply and demand will be increasing. Second, even as the professor also mentioned, the crop agronomy. We also are worried about whether we will be able to repair the water or the irrigation infrastructure in the area, even if the water is available. Will we be making it available at the farm gate so that farmers can prepare and then sow wheat on time. Number three, sometimes the floods also affect the soils positively when the water stays there and then leaves the new silt on the top of the soil, normally fertile enough to give us a good production. So if we can provide seeds, repair our irrigation infrastructure, and the water sort of goes down on time, giving enough time to the farmers to prepare their lands, I would say that we will be able to save the major food security crisis. But it will still, we are feeling there will be a significant gap between supply and demand. And given that the crisis in Ukraine and other wheat supplying areas, and then the prices going up, so these losses and higher cost of import and higher quantity to be imported for food security will further multiply the figures that the World Bank is suggesting at this level, $40 billion.
Right, Dr. Shahid, your point is well taken. Very elaborately, you put forth a number of things that might be affecting Pakistan in coming future because of these devastating floods. Now, Dr. Ejaz, when we talk about the idea of debt swaps, it does depict that installation of disaster-resilient infrastructure in Pakistan. For that matter, Pakistan needs huge investments and inflow of money as well. Since Pakistan's economy is already under quite a big strain. So what exactly needs to be done in this regard? Does the responsibility solely lie with the international community in order to make debt swaps happen?
Well, I think yes, in a sense that international community has to consider this because this is a disaster and emergency situation is already going on for last many months now. I think we know that this debt swap happens on various such occasions where a country is in need of support from the international community, and this is the best option that okay, if the country can actually utilize their resources and come up with some positive infrastructure development. And as you mentioned, I think we need such infrastructure which is environmental friendly, which is resistance to many disasters, and a win-win situation comes. We also need at this time technology. We need such technology which can actually help us in rebuilding, in reconstruction of the losses that has happened, especially to the bridges, to the road, to the buildings. And need to emphasize more and more on the building the capacity of the human resource development in the country. And I think if we take example of Netherlands, and they have actually come up with so many different technologies in order to cope with the flood situation. We are facing floods from rain or from river, but they have tackled the situation which was coming from sea. So I think we need to look into these aspects, building the capacity, technology, training, and based on that, come up with a solution which is more environmental friendly, which is more resistance to such events.
Is there any research and development work that is underway within Pakistan that could be utilized to install the disaster resilient infrastructure, or do we have to depend again on the other countries to get that technology transferred into Pakistan?
Well, I think as far as research is concerned, there are very few institutions in Pakistan which are involved in such research. Ultimately, we have to go and find solutions from outside, unfortunately. And then even within the region, Bangladesh has actually developed their infrastructure to the extent that the damages due to floods have reduced tremendously. And I think I would also like to add here the early warning systems, which play very important.
Dr. Ejaz, I'll come to that particular point. I want to discuss that one in detail with both of you. Let's take Dr. Shahid's view on debt swaps. Dr. Shahid, what sense does the idea of debt swap makes to you, and how can it be worked upon?
I think if you see the Pakistan's contributions to the greenhouse gas emissions, and then see the damages that it is suffering, and many other countries who are facing in Nigeria and in Africa have almost nothing to do with greenhouse gas emissions, and they are suffering a lot. And climate justice demands that the developed countries who are mainly responsible for this climate change that the global community is facing, they need to come up and help developing countries adapt to the situation. In Pakistan's cases, it's different. We are not just struggling to adapt to the situation. We are offering a huge opportunity to the global community by introducing 10 billion tree plantation kind of initiatives. The global community should thank Pakistan for that kind of a huge mitigation effort and come forward when the Pakistan lead at this stage and write off some debts, reschedules, PEP, whatever, they can reduce the burden, economic burden at this stage, so that Pakistan can go through this difficult situation. I also like to talk a little bit more about what Dr. Afzal is saying about this reduction of losses. We have so far still struggling with our national water policy. But just looking at the National Flood Protection Plan 4, it starts with that a lot of debate going on. Seems to be Pakistan national government seems to be moving towards a comprehensive water policy. We're still struggling on that. And then when we see so many different institutions involved, while we have a flood commission of Pakistan, they have to have a very clear mandate to go for this kind of research and focus on both. I would say we should have a two-way strategy. One, reducing the damages through building our infrastructures according to our own requirements. And for that, given the experience of Bangladesh, this is not very complicated. We have the manpower, we have the institutions. If they are given the mandate, they are given the resources, they can do it. But they should also focus on one side, the floods are causing damages. On the other, in the countries where we are we are facing water shortages also, we should also invest in increasing the benefits of the floods by providing storage in the areas from where we can also provide
Dr. Shahid, this
water
is
to
a
the
very
community
interesting and
and for
very
the agriculture
pertinent
later
point
on.
that you have just raised, that in order to reap the dividends or the benefits of the water flow in Pakistan by proper management, I would like you to delve deeper on this particular point. But we are now joined by another participant in the show, Mr. Parvez Jamil Mir, senior journalist, popularly known as PJ Mir. Mr. Mir, thank you very much for your time at Views on News. Really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mr. Mir, now there is a statement by Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. There is a political side to the effects of the devastating floods Pakistan has been hit with. Let me quote what Prime Minister said: "If there is a dissatisfaction leading to deeper political instability and we are not able to achieve our basic requirements and goals, this can obviously lead to serious problems." And he went on to say that I'm not saying it in terms of any kind of threat, but I am saying there is a real possibility, since the new estimates suggest that the losses accrued because of the devastation caused by these floods happen to be around $40 billion. But the pledges which have been made by the international community are not met completely. So there is a kind of a fear that is expressed by Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. What needs to be done in this scenario?
Well, first of all, if you remember, Prime Minister earlier on, a few months ago, said beggars cannot be choosers. I totally agree with him. One, how long are we going to continue asking for aid? Why don't we get ourselves self-sufficient so we can, sustain our own dangers and sustain our own damages and profits? Now, what really needs to be done is we've got to get out of this mode that, I am going to be running the country, or the opposition is going to be running the country, and we need to be getting out of that mode. Only how? I'll tell you how. We've got these traders in the market who are not paying taxes to the government. Not today, but, all the governments. They don't pay the taxes. I mean, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is not going to come around and pay taxes, give money from his pocket, or Imran Khan, or Nawaz Sharif, or Zardari, or anybody. The countries are run on taxes. We are very lenient as far as taxes are concerned. What we need to do is get everybody on the tax base, which means strengthening our state. The state has to be strengthened. Governments will come, governments will go. But we need to strengthen the state by enlarging, just broadening our tax base. How? We've got these traders, the market traders, who are doing trillion-dollar business, and yet they're not paying any money to the FBR. Well, we need to put a check on that. There's no point in putting the restaurants and big shops and big markets into on the tax base. So whatever you sell, you pay the revenue to the FBR. Get these people there, get them out of this cash business, and that is where we collect the money. This happens all over the world. Why can't we do it? We don't need foreign aid. We don't need help from anybody else.
Interjection. You're aptly saying that there is a lot needs to be done in order to put right mechanisms to get the dividends and generate our own money and our own revenue. But this climate-induced flood doesn't have to deal with that problem. It has to do with the industrialized nations, the industrialization that has actually caused the climate change, and that has affected Pakistan. This time around, Pakistan, it's not only Pakistan. We have seen devastating floods in Nigeria as well, also certain other countries of Asia. So that is what exactly has been verified by the United Nations Secretary General, that it's not the matter of generosity the international community needs to contribute for the humanitarian work in Pakistan. It is the matter of climate justice.
Look, how long are we going to keep on asking? I don't rate Pakistan as a third world country. Pakistan is a very highly developed country. It has a lot of potential, but at the end of the day, we don't use our potential to the true potential of it. That's where the problem lies. Now, today, as you say, there are floods in Nigeria, etc., all over the world. Yes, there will be floods. Yes, there will be disasters. You look in California. You look at, in the United States. Floods will come along. Natural disasters and calamities are going to be there all the time. But what we need here, as far as Pakistan is concerned, we need to be working ahead of schedule. Now, as you know, right now as we speak, there's snowfall up north. Now, that's going to be accumulating a lot of snow. Next year, there'll again be floods. What are we doing about it? We have done nothing about it. We've got to be working on it now. I understand there's a lot of opposition to Kalabagh Dam. I understand, there's a slow work on dams. Fine. But what we need to do immediately to counter next year's floods and next year's disaster is by building reservoirs. That's what we need to do. We need to be doing immediately. In England, they don't have any water. They survive on rainfall. And when there's no rain, like in the last a few months, they were on the verge of, stopping and putting a curfew on water use. So here, what we need to do is we've got everything. We've got the weather. All we need to do is build reservoirs around the big cities, and they will ensure that we have water. They will ensure that the water table rises. They will also ensure that we won't have disasters as what we've seen this year. So here, we've got to, number one, stop the blame game. That's the foremost thing that we need to do. And everybody's got to put their heads together to work for the country, not work for a government, work for the country. As I said, governments will come and governments will go. But we need to be, at this moment in time, we're in a rescue mode. Yes, you're quite right. There's $40 billion of damage in Pakistan. And who knows what next? Your Kharif crop is, out of the window. Rabi crop is more or less damaged. So what are we going to do? Import? Well, we can't afford. We can't afford. I agree with the Prime Minister. How can we go out and, spend, dollars all over when we ourselves in a lot of thick soup? So I think what we need to do is really put our heads together, think rationally. We need to be talking to each other. We need to be working on the same frame. Now, the opposition, Jawad, is always a government in waiting. If the government in waiting does not realize it's a government in waiting, by the time, if and when they do come into power, they'll have nothing in the kitty. So the government in waiting has to strengthen the government in order that after the people's mandate, whether they come or not, at least the state gets strengthened. And that is the thinking, we need to be having around us. And sadly, we're not working on that. We're all working at this present moment in time. What's going to happen? Where is going to happen? It's all there. Like I said, Pakistan has all the potential. It can meet any problems. It can, it can tackle any problems. All it needs is, getting in the right direction. And that's what we need to be doing in this country at this moment.
Right. Mr. Parvez Jamil, Amir, senior journalist, thank you very much for your time, for being on Views on News. Really appreciate that. So, Dr. Shahid, you were already mentioning a couple of measures Pakistan can take in order to mitigate or the proper management of water resources in Pakistan. Please go ahead.
You see, when we are experiencing these floods, not just in the last decade or so, it started in 50s, 60s, we have then 73, then we 80, 92, 2010. So we should have enough experience of dealing with the floods. And what we needed to do is, and then we were working on that. I was looking at these National Flood Protection Plan 3 and now 4. So they are suggesting things that needs to be in place to protect our people and protect our infrastructures, protecting it from the flood water. But what we have not considered, to me, in these plans is that we are mainly, if we look at the policies or options, we have only two options. One, divert that water to some other area where it can spread and have less loss and more benefit, or having direct infrastructure to divert it to those rivers that are there dry and have enough bed for storage and diverting that water to the water deficit areas. Second one is this storage along the rivers, the flood water storage. That means that will not only help us store the water, but also work like a delaying action, giving time for the people downstream to adjust to the new changing situation. What we have seen in the past that when the flood water comes to the area and it poses risk to the infrastructure, then we have to breach that infrastructure to give it a way to so that water can just flow from that area and then go back to the river on the next using the natural slope on the next possible places. Unfortunately, we have developed our housing, other infrastructure without realizing that there will be floods, and then we need to keep the ways clear from where that water will go back to the river. Look at what is happening in Sindh. Water is not going down because it is not flowing out of those areas. More than 75% drainage are blocked. And then unless you have the drainage, you cannot drain that water from those areas. And then that I'm concerned that might affect the wheat sowing season if we will not be able to drain that water in Sindh. The situation in Punjab is little better.
Scenario. Let's consider this. If you install the right infrastructure at the right places, and then you get the record rainfall 8 times or 7 times more than the normal downpour. So what's going to be the result in that scenario? Of course, you have to give the water a kind of a flow through a drainage. If 7 or 8 times downpours are happening, which are induced by the climate change, so no matter how reorientation or putting the infrastructure at the right places is ensured, the floods are going to affect Pakistan.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we will be able, for this kind of situation where 6 times higher rain, and then on the places like it started from Balochistan. And it was not sort of a regular scheduled monsoon we were looking at this season. It was irregular. But when we say early warning system can help a little bit for the population to adjust or move from the area, but it doesn't.
So what about, Dr. Shahid, what about in case of flash floods? Flash floods just come and go like in a nick of a second. You don't have that room or that much of time in order to let people know that a flood is coming.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That early warning systems will help, but not much, because it doesn't give enough time for the people to move out of those areas. And one other very important reason that is the sort of under our control. I'm not sure why we are taking that long time to understand and then make decisions. When it comes to that risk, it should be very clear to the people of the area and the departments responsible to breach from where the protection band will be get the way to the water.
Right.
It takes every time they select a different place, and then people are caught unaware of that they will be underwater in next an hour or so. So that should be planned, and people should know about that. Third,
Dr. Shahid, do you think the people who've been living in a certain area, generation after the generation, they've got their affinity with a certain piece of land, and they are going to vacate that right away, just the authorities are intimating them that they could be hit by a natural disaster?
If they are
There is a
making
social aspect to
announcements
it as well.
in the night, around midnight, that the water is coming to your villages, you need to vacate it. They have not enough time to lead to keep the sort of move the livestock, move their families on time. At least they should know that what is the water situation, and from there, government has decided to give this water away out of this area. If they know in advance, then they can make some arrangements. And I was doing a seminar after 2010, sitting with some communities, making some of their risk reduction plans. So they knew all these things. But what they needed was that they were saying that this time the water came from a different angle, from the different direction. Second,
because this time around the downpour was a record. So let's take Dr. Ejaz's point of view on this particular thing. Installing the right infrastructure at the right places, yet you get 7 to 8% more downpour.
Yeah.
Is it not going to affect in that scenario?
Of course it is going to affect, but I think that most of these structures are built keeping that consideration in mind. If you are talking about climate resilient infrastructure, and if it is developed according to the requirement of that resilience, so I think that mostly these structures can tolerate, can actually, but of course this was massive. It was huge, unprecedented, and also in those areas which were not part of the monsoon range, like Balochistan or even in northern part of Pakistan. But I think there are some indigenous practices also. In case when we talk about early warning system, I remember while traveling in Job, I faced this issue, and then the guide who was sitting next to me, he stopped the vehicle, and within a few seconds a flash flood came, and then it took everything away, and we were actually escaped. And the reason was that guy, he heard the noise, and there was some their own system where people would actually just loudly, they will just tell the community in the neighborhood community. So there are some indigenous systems as well that can actually help, and we need to look into that aspect as well, because sometimes technology fails. So then these practices actually are the one which helps. So and then in addition to this, as you mentioned, like 7 or 8 times more rain and infrastructure. Pakistan is actually water stress country. The per capita water requirement has decreased tremendously. We need approximately 1,000 meter, I think, cubic meter water per annum or something like that.
There is a natural mechanism, monsoon. Every year you get 2 months of continuous rainfall.
Right.
So that calls for proper water management.
It does. And then there are systems where, you can develop those systems which are more environmental friendly, and then which can help in recharging your aquifer. Storage, there are those recharge wells, and then we have seen in Islamabad, in Lahore, people have actually coming up with some some of these solutions. It can take some water, and then it can actually reduce the damage to a greater extent.
So, Dr. Ejaz, when we talk specifically about early warning systems, United Nations Secretary General is going to launch an action plan during the upcoming COP27 as well. And he has said that there are certain reports that prove that early warning systems are the lifesavers. Right now, can space technology be used? Can exactly the quantity of precipitation be measured before it happens?
I don't think so. Maybe there are some new technologies which can help, but I think normally the Pakistan Met Department, they issue all the notification and
the warnings are issued.
Warnings are issued.
Heavy to very heavy downpour.
Exactly.
Might be
they mentioned that it will be heavy, it will be light, or it will be medium.
So there is an approximation about the quantity of the precipitation that is going to happen.
To some extent, yes. And as far as for general public, I think that is what plays an important role in order to save their lives. But the problem is that these instruction need to actually filter at the lowest level, at the small village where there is hardly any communication, so that they are aware of the situation, or they are aware of the warning. I would like to point out here another aspect which is related to international community, and which was actually like when you were talking about PJ Mir. I was just thinking that I think there is this loss and damage mechanism which is very important, that if international community there is a binding actually which is going to be discussed. It has not been approved yet under the UNFCCC, which is the convention, the climate change convention, where there is a need to develop a mechanism of whatever losses are due to the climate change and damages which has occurred should be considered, reviewed, and then those countries, industrial countries, which are the main root cause of these climate change scenarios, should be paying
according to the UN, the G20 happens to be the 80% contributor of the greenhouse gas emissions in the world. Dr. Ejaz Ahmad, environmentalist, thank you very much for your time, for being in the studio on Views on News. We really appreciate that. And on Skype, we were joined by Dr. Shahid, water expert. He was joining us from the UK. Dr. Shahid, thank you very much for your time, also being on Views on News. Really appreciate that. So we had a very detailed discussion as what needs to be done, as the latest estimates regarding the devastation, the damages and the losses which have been accrued by the recent catastrophic flooding in Pakistan happen to be around $40 billion. And there is a fear that this particular number may rise in the coming months. Now, there was an idea of debt swaps, installing the disaster resilient infrastructure at the right places, and that could actually help Pakistan out in the future in order to face such type of natural calamities. There also needs to be capacity building when it comes to the concerned departments also. Now, the United Nations Secretary General has called for early warning systems, which have proved to be a lifesaver. So at the same time, since Pakistan contributes only less than 1% to the greenhouse gas emissions in the world, yet it remains to be one of those 10 countries which are the most vulnerable because of the climate change impacts. That's where the responsibility of the international community comes. And international community, the pledges which it has made, it should actually fulfill that, so that Pakistan could deal with the devastating impact of the recent floods and avert a major second catastrophe, which the WHO has called in form of the health crisis, as well as hunger and poverty. With that note, we come to the end of today's Views on News. Until the next one, take good care of yourselves.